Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had Doctor Strange Time Stone. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sun beat down on Takoba Municipal Beach, baking the garbage into a foul-smelling crust that lined the coast. It was a graveyard of human excess, rusted cars, broken appliances, and mountains of plastic bags that rustled like dead leaves in the hot sea breeze. For most, this place was an eyesore. For 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya, it was a hiding spot. He huddled inside the hollowed-out carcass of a washing machine, his knees pulled to his chest. His breath hitched in small, terrified gasps, which he tried desperately to stifle with a dirt-stained hand. Outside, the sounds of explosions popped and crackled like fireworks. Deku! Come out, you quirkless loser! The voice belonged to Katsuki Bakugo. It was rough, arrogant, and edged with the terrifying promise of pain. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. Tears leaked out, tracking clean lines through the grime on his cheeks. Earlier that day, the doctor had delivered the news that had shattered his world. No quirk factor, 2 joints in the pinky toe. Give up, kid, he wasn't special. He wasn't a hero. He was nothing. I know you're in here somewhere. Bakugo shouted closer now. A blast echoed, shaking the pile of trash Izuku was hiding in. Izuku flinched, his foot slipping and kicking a metallic object inside the washing machine. It didn't sound like a soda can or a piece of scrap metal. It sounded heavy. Dense. He opened his teary eyes and looked down. Half buried in the silt and sand accumulated at the bottom of the machine was a necklace. It looked impossibly old. The cord was made of thick, dark leather that hadn't rotted despite the damp environment. The pendant itself was a heavy bronze eye, tarnished with centuries of verdigris, featuring crossed grid lines over a closed eyelid. It felt warm. While the rest of the trash beach was cold metal and rotting plastic, this object radiated a low, thrumming heat that seemed to synchronize with Izuku's frantic heartbeat. Without thinking, driven by a compulsion he couldn't name, Izuku reached out. His small fingers brushed the cold bronze. Thump! A sound like a massive drum beat echoed inside his skull. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The smell of rotting garbage vanished, replaced by the scent of ozone, old parchment, and incense. Found you! The washing machine was ripped away. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, silhouetted against the blinding sun, sparks dancing in his palms. His grin was predatory. Trying to hide in the trash? Fitting. Izuku scrambled back, clutching the heavy bronze amulet to his chest. Keikaken, please? Leave me alone. You need to learn your place, Deku, Bakugo snarled. He lunged forward, his right hand cocked back, glowing with the orange light of an impending explosion. You're nothing, Izuku screamed. He didn't want to get hurt. He didn't want this moment to happen. He wanted it to stop. He wanted to go back. Go back. The bronze eye in his hand snapped open. An emerald light, brighter than the sun, purer than the ocean, erupted from the amulet. It wasn't just light, it was structure. Intricate mandalas of glowing green energy materialized in the air, spinning with geometric precision. Runes that Izuku had never seen, yet somehow understood, orbited his small body. Bakugo's explosion detonated, but the fire didn't burn. Instead, the orange flames froze in midair, crystallizing like jagged stained glass. Bakugo's shouting face distorted, his movements slowing down until he was statue still, suspended in a roar that made no sound. Izuku gasped, the air in his lungs feeling thin and electrified. He looked around. A seagull hung motionless in the sky above them. The waves crashing against the shore were frozen sculptures of white foam. Dust motes floated in the air, suspended in perfect stillness. What? Izuku whispered. The amulet grew hot against his chest. He looked down at the green light. He could feel something flowing from the stone into his veins, not blood, but something older. It felt like sand pouring through an hourglass. Reverse, the stones seemed to whisper. It wasn't a voice, but a concept pushed directly into his brain. Izuku panicked. He waved his hands frantically, mimicking the way the green mandalas were spinning. Go back! Go away! He grabbed the air, and instinct took over. He twisted his wrist counterclockwise. The world lurched. The flames from Bakugo's explosion were sucked back into his palm. Bakugo flew backward, his feet unstepping their lunge. The washing machine flew back over Izuku's head, reassembling its position. The tears on Izuku's face ran upward into his tear ducts. Izuku sat in the dark washing machine. Found you! Bakugo's voice shouted from outside. Izuku blinked. He was back. He was back 10 seconds ago. The washing machine was ripped away. Bakugo stood there, exact same pose, exact same grin. Trying to hide in the trash? Fitting. Izuku stared at him, bewildered. He looked down at his hands. The amulet was there, the eye closed, the green light gone. But the heat remained. You need to learn your place, Deku, Bakugo snarled, winding up the punch. This time, Izuku didn't scream. He knew exactly where the punch was coming from. He had lived this moment 5 seconds ago. As Bakugo thrust his hand forward, Izuku didn't cower. He shifted his weight to the left, ducking under the explosion with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible for a clumsy 4-year-old. Boom! The explosion hit the sand where Izuku's head had been a fraction of a second prior. Bakugo stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward into the pile of trash. He caught himself, turning around with a look of pure shock. What the? How did you dodge that? Izuku scrambled to his feet, clutching the amulet. He didn't stick around to explain. He ran. He ran faster than he ever had, the heavy bronze relic bouncing against his chest, the phantom sensation of green sparks dancing at his fingertips. The years that followed were not kind, but they were enlightening. Izuku Midoriya was still diagnosed as quirkless. The genetic tests were conclusive. He had no mutant factor, he could not sweat nitroglycerin, he could not manipulate gravity, and he certainly couldn't breathe fire, but he had the eye. He kept it hidden. He learned early on that the amulet did not like being separated from him. If he left it at home, he would feel a sickness in his soul, a dull ache that made the world feel out of sync. So, he wore it under his shirt, the heavy cord hidden by his high collars. The stone became his teacher. It started with dreams. Izuku would fall asleep in his All Might-themed bedroom and wake up in a vast, impossible library with no ceiling, where books floated on currents of magic. There was no All Might here, only silence and knowledge. He learned that what he held was the Eye of Agamotto. It contained the Time Stone, one of the 6 singularities that predated the universe. He learned that magic was not a quirk. Quirks were biological evolutions. Magic was the harnessing of energy from other dimensions to reshape reality. It was harder. It was dangerous. At age 7, he accidentally aged a flower to dust. At age 10, he trapped himself in a 10-minute time loop during a math test to get the answers right, only to suffer a migraine so severe he passed out and was hospitalized for exhaustion. That was the cost. Quirks required stamina. Magic required a piece of your soul, a toll on the mind and body that biology couldn't mitigate. Izuku learned to meditate before he learned long division. He learned martial arts from dusty tomes in his dream library, the way of the Kree, the forms of Kamartaj, because his body needed to be a vessel capable of withstanding the flow of time. By the time he was 14, Izuku Midoriya was a ghost in his own life. He was pale, with dark circles perpetually etched under his eyes from sleepless nights spent studying the astral plane. He was quiet, his stutter replaced by a weary, soft-spoken cadence. He no longer flinched when Bakugo yelled at him. How could he be afraid of a sparking teenager when he had stared into the dark dimension in his nightmares and seen the entity Dormammu laughing at the concept of mortality? But he still wanted to be a hero. That desire was the one thing the stone hadn't erased. If anything, it had intensified it. Izuku knew that the stone was on Earth for a reason. He was its guardian. And a guardian protects. Mizurufu, Japan. Present day. Aldera Junior High was loud. The classroom buzzed with the frenetic energy of teenagers waiting for the final bell. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your futures, the teacher announced, throwing his papers into the air. But I know you all want to go into the hero course. The class erupted into cheers and displays of quirks. Eyes stretched, fingers elongated, faint telekinetic waves rattled pencils. Izuku sat silently at his desk, sketching in a notebook titled Hero Analysis for the Future number 13. However, if one were to look closely at the page he was working on, they wouldn't see stats about Empty Lady. They would see a complex geometric diagram of the shields of Seraphim, annotated in perfect Sanskrit. Hey, teach! Bakugo's voice cut through the noise. He was leaning back in his chair, feet on the desk. Don't lump me in with these extras. I'm the only one here with the stuff to make it to UA. The class jeered, but Bakugo ignored them. I'm gonna surpass All Might and become the richest hero of all time. Oh, the teacher muttered, checking his list. Midoriya, didn't you put down UA as well? The room went dead silent. Then, laughter exploded. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course with just good grades. He's quirkless. He'll die in the entrance exam. Bakugo slammed his hand on Izuku's desk, the explosion charring the wood. Deku! You think you can compete with me? You're worse than the rejects. You have no quirk. Izuku slowly looked up. His green eyes were deep, unsettlingly calm. He didn't flinch at the smoke rising from his desk. I'm not trying to compete, Kaken, Izuku said softly. I have a responsibility. There are things that need to be protected. Protected? Bakugo scoffed. You can't even protect your lunch money. The bell rang, saving Izuku from further interrogation. As the class filed out, Bakugo lingered. He snatched the notebook from Izuku's desk. What's this? Hero analysis? He looked at the page with the geometric spell circle. What is this trash? Doodling cult symbols now? Give it back, Izuku said, standing up. Bakugo clapped his hands, sandwiching the notebook. Boom! He tossed the charred book out the open window. If you want to be a hero so bad, there's a quick way. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life. Bakugo walked out with his lackeys, laughing. Izuku stood there, his hand trembling. Not with fear, but with the effort it took to not snap his fingers and send Bakugo falling through a portal to the top of Mount Everest for an hour to cool off. Restrained, the stone hummed against his sternum. The timeline must remain intact. I know, Izuku whispered to the empty room. I know. He went outside to retrieve his notebook. It had landed in the koi pond. He stared at the water, watching the ink bleed. With a sigh, he held his hand over the water. He rotated his wrist counterclockwise. A small green mandala appeared around his hand. Time, heed me. The ripples in the pond reversed. The notebook flew out of the water, the charm marks fading, the paper drying, until it landed in his hand in the exact condition it was in before Bakugo touched it. Handy, he muttered, shoving the book into his yellow backpack. But it doesn't fix the personality. Izuku took the long way home. He needed to clear his head. The mental strain of maintaining his perception of time, of constantly seeing the probable futures flickering like ghosts around every person he met, was giving him a migraine. He walked under the Tatiha underpass. The shadows were deep here. Sudden danger. The hairs on the back of Izuku's neck stood up. The stone pulsed a warning, immediate threat. Behind. Izuku spun around, but the manhole cover had already burst open. A massive, fluid shape surged out, a villain made entirely of dark green sludge, a medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain hissed, his voice wet and gurgling. Izuku stepped back, his hand instinctively going to the necklace under his uniform. Don't worry, kid, the sludge lunged. It'll only hurt for 45 seconds. Izuku didn't scream. He analyzed. Fluid body. Physical attacks useless. He intends to invade my respiratory system. As the sludge wave crashed down, Izuku brought his hands together. By the hoary hosts of Hoggoth, he slammed his palms outward. An orange translucent shield, etched with fiery runes, materialized instantly in front of him. Splash! The sludge slammed into the magical barrier, sizzling against the mystical energy. What? The villain recoiled, his liquid eyes widening. A shield quirk? Annoying! The villain lashed out with a tendril of slime, whipping around the shield to grab Izuku's ankle. Izuku gritted his teeth. He was small, and while his magic was potent, his physical body was still that of a 14-year-old boy. The villain yanked, and Izuku was slammed against the tunnel wall. The shield shattered into sparks. Gotcha! The slime rushed into Izuku's mouth and nose. Can't breathe. Lungs filling. Izuku clawed at the fluid. His vision swam. The stone burned against his chest, demanding release. Use me. Freeze him. No, Izuku thought, panic rising. If I freeze time now, the sludge stays in my lungs. I'll suffocate in frozen time. Texas. A deep voice boomed from the sewer entrance. The manhole cover flew into the air. A massive figure, muscular and blonde, stood illuminated by the tunnel light. Smash! The wind pressure was colossal. It hit the sludge villain like a freight train. The liquid body was blown apart, splattering against the tunnel walls. Izuku was freed, gasping for air, coughing up remnants of slime. He fell to his knees, wheezing. Are you okay, young man? Izuku looked up. Through his watering eyes he saw him. All Might. The symbol of peace. But Izuku didn't just see the hero. The stone's vision overlaid reality. Izuku saw a golden aura around All Might, blindingly bright. But underneath the gold, on the hero's left side, there was a gaping void. A black, festering wound in the man's life force. It looked like death waiting to claim a debt. All Might? Izuku rasped. Indeed. The hero struck a pose, though Izuku noticed a slight tremor in his leg. I apologize for getting you caught up in my justice ing. I have captured the villain. All Might held up 2 soda bottles filled with the unconscious sludge. Izuku wiped his mouth. He stood up, his legs shaky. He should ask for an autograph. He should fanboy. But the sight of that spiritual wound was distracting him. Sir, Izuku said, his voice surprisingly steady. You're hurt. All Might froze. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. I am fine. Just fighting crime. No, Izuku stepped closer, his eyes glowing faintly green as he unconsciously drew on the stone's sight. Your time, it's leaking. Your left side. It's almost gone. All Might flinched as if struck. Young man, what is your quirk? Izuku hesitated. I don't have a quirk. All Might blinked. Quirkless? But your eyes, and that shield. Suddenly, All Might coughed. Blood sprayed from his mouth. A massive cloud of steam exploded around him. Izuku didn't scream. He had seen shapeshifters in the text of the Vishanti. He watched calmly as the smoke cleared, revealing a skeletal, emaciated man with sunken eyes. So, Izuku said, tilting his head. This is the reality. The skeletal man wiped blood from his chin. You're taking this well. Most kids scream. I've seen weirder things, Izuku muttered. Are you dying? All Might sighed, sitting heavily on the ground. Straight to the point, huh? Yes. 5 years ago, an enemy did this to me. He lifted his shirt, revealing the horrific scar that matched the spiritual void Izuku had seen. Respiratory system destroyed. Stomach removed. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Izuku stared at the scar. The stone hummed. We can fix this, it whispered. Turn back the body. Revert the injury. Izuku reached out. I might be able to. No, All Might said sharply, pulling his shirt down. This is the scar I carry. It's a reminder. Besides, young man, you cannot heal what is missing. He looked at Izuku with a serious expression. You said you are quirkless? Yes. And yet you saw through my form. And you survived that villain longer than most. All Might looked at him with a strange intensity. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives. Can a quirkless person be a hero? I cannot in good conscience say yes. It's too dangerous. Perhaps a police officer? The words hit Izuku, but they didn't crush him like they would have a few years ago. He knew All Might was right logically. Without power you die. I understand, Izuku said quietly. Good. Now I must get this guy to the police. All Might stood up, grabbed the bottles, and leaped into the sky. Izuku stood alone in the tunnel. He's wrong. Izuku touched the eye of Agamotto. It's not about having a quirk. It's about having the will to act. He walked out of the tunnel. But he noticed something. The bottle. All Might's pocket. Had it been secure? Izuku's mind flashed back. He replayed the memory of All Might's jump. He slowed the memory down in his mind. Frame by frame, there. As All Might jumped, the force of the launch dislodged the soda bottle. It fell. Izuku's blood ran cold. The villain, he whispered. He dropped the villain. The Tatooine shopping district was in flames. Izuku ran toward the smoke. He didn't need to ask for directions. The chaos in the timeline was like a beacon. He could feel the threads of destiny snapping. When he arrived, the scene was a nightmare. The sludge villain was huge now, towering over the fires. Pro-heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, were standing by, helpless. My wood will catch fire. I can't fit in the alley. There's a hostage. I can't strike. Izuku pushed through the crowd. He looked at the villain. Held captive in the center of the muck was Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo was thrashing, setting off explosions that only fanned the flames around them. His eyes were wide, filled with a primal terror. He was suffocating. He's going to die, the stone realized. This is a nexus point. If he dies, the future shifts dark. Izuku looked at the heroes. They were waiting. Waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. They're waiting for the perfect moment, Izuku muttered. But there is no perfect moment. There's only time. Izuku's feet moved before his brain gave the order. He sprinted past the police line. Hey! Kid! Get back! Death Arms shouted. Izuku didn't listen. He ran straight into the fire. The heat was intense, searing his skin. Deku? Bakugo choked out, seeing the green-haired boy running toward death. Izuku stopped 10 meters from the villain. The sludge monster roared, raising a massive liquid tentacle to crush the boy. You again? I'll squash you like a bug. The tentacle swung down. Izuku reached under his shirt and grabbed the eye of Agamotto. He ripped the leather cord, pulling the amulet free. He held it up, palm open. I've come to bargain. Izuku shouted, though he wasn't sure why he said that. It just felt right. He twisted his wrist. Spell, the chronostasis. The eye opened. The green light blinded the villain. Tick. The sound was deafening. The world turned gray. The flames froze, becoming jagged sculptures of red and orange crystal. The smoke stopped swirling, hanging in the air like gray cotton. The villain's tentacle stopped inches from Izuku's face. Bakugo's scream was silenced, his mouth frozen open. Izuku was the only thing moving in a static world. He exhaled, his breath misting in the sudden magical chill. Okay, Izuku whispered. His nose began to bleed. Freezing time in such a chaotic, high-energy environment was excruciating. It felt like holding up a collapsing building with his mind. He walked calmly around the frozen tentacle. He stepped over the crystallized fire. He climbed up the frozen debris until he was face to face with the villain. He looked at Bakugo. You're always so loud, Kaken, Izuku said to the frozen boy. Izuku analyzed the situation. He couldn't just pull Bakugo out. The sludge was fused too tightly. If he resumed time, the sludge would just grab him again. He needed to separate them. Izuku placed his hands on the sludge covering Bakugo's mouth. By the crimson bands of Sidorak, red energy ribbons manifested from his hands, winding around the sludge that was suffocating Bakugo. But instead of binding, Izuku used them to pry, and by the winds of Watum, he positioned a small, swirling vortex of wind magic right at the villain's eye, the weak point. He climbed back down. He stood directly in front of the villain. 3 Izuku counted. 2. 1. He snapped his fingers. Time resumes. Color slammed back into the world. The noise returned all at once, a roar of fire and screams. But immediately the spells Izuku had placed activated. The red bands ripped the sludge away from Bakugo's mouth, allowing him to take a massive gasp of air. Simultaneously, the wind vortex exploded into the villain's eye. Arg! The villain shrieked, recoiling from the sudden, inexplicable pain. His grip loosened. Kaken! Now! Izuku screamed. Bakugo, fueled by fresh oxygen and pure rage, didn't question it. He unleashed a massive explosion from his palms, blasting himself backward, out of the loosened sludge. Izuku caught him, or tried to. They both tumbled onto the pavement. Deku? Bakugo coughed, staring at him. What the hell did you do? Saved you, Izuku panted, wiping the blood from his nose. The villain recovered. He was furious. You brats! He surged forward, a tidal wave of muck. Izuku raised his hand, preparing to cast a shield, but his vision blurred. He was tapped out. The time freeze had taken everything. I can't stop it, Izuku realized. Then, a blur of speed. Detroit. Smash! The air pressure changed. Clouds parted. The rain started. All Might stood between the boys and the scattered remains of the villain. He had pushed past his limit. Steam poured off him, obscuring his skeletal form from the crowd, maintaining the buff illusion for one final second. The crowd went wild. The scolding was inevitable. "You were reckless!" Kamui shouted at Izuku. "You have no quirk. You could have gotten yourself killed, and you—" Death Arms pointed at Bakugo. "That was amazing! What a quirk! You're a natural!" Izuku tuned them out. He sat on the back of an ambulance, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He clutched the eye of Agamotto, which was now back around his neck. It was cold and dormant. Bakugo stood a few feet away, surrounded by praising heroes. But he wasn't smiling. He was staring at Izuku. He had felt it. The moment when the world stopped. He remembered the silence. Eventually, the heroes let Izuku go. He walked home under the setting sun. He was exhausted. Every muscle ached. "Deku!" Izuku stopped and turned. Bakugo ran up to him, panting. "I didn't ask for your help," Bakugo yelled, his voice cracking. "And I don't know what trick you pulled. You stopped. Everything stopped." "What was that?" Izuku looked at his childhood friend. "It wasn't a trick, Kaken. You're still quirkless," Bakugo insisted, though he looked terrified. "The doctor said so. I am quirkless," Izuku agreed. He tapped the bronze eye on his chest. "This isn't a quirk." Bakugo stared at the amulet. "Then what is it?" "It's complicated," Izuku said. "Go home, Katsuki." He turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo speechless. It was the first time Izuku had used his first name in years. Izuku continued his walk. He just wanted to sleep. "I am here!" Izuku jumped as All Might slid out from an alleyway, crashing into a wall in a cloud of dust. "All Might? Young man!" All Might reverted to his skeletal form, coughing up a spatter of blood. "I got away from the reporters. I needed to speak with you." Izuku bowed. "I'm sorry for interfering. The heroes already yelled at me." "No," All Might said, his voice serious. "They were right to scold you for safety, but you were the only one who acted." All Might stepped closer. The setting sun cast long shadows. "I watched you. You ran in when the pros stood back. And that power, you froze the villain, didn't you?" Izuku stiffened. "You saw?" "I felt it," All Might said. "I've been around a long time. I know that quirk energy feels like biology. But that..." He pointed to the eye. "That felt like destiny." Izuku clutched the necklace. "I found it when I was 4. It protects me. It teaches me." All Might looked at the boy, scrawny, tired, with eyes far too old for his face. "Top heroes have stories about their school days," All Might said. "Most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think." Izuku looked up, tears pricking his eyes. "That is what happened to you today, isn't it?" "Yes," Izuku whispered. All Might smiled, a genuine, gentle smile. "You said you were quirkless. But you are not powerless. Young man, you have the heart of a hero." Izuku fell to his knees, sobbing. It was what he had wanted to hear his whole life. However, All Might continued, looking down at the glowing bronze eye. "That relic you wear. I have read about such things in the archives of previous One for All users. Ancient artifacts. Dangerous artifacts." Izuku looked up, wiping his eyes. "One for All?" All Might sat down on the pavement next to him. "We have much to discuss, Midoriya. About my power. And about yours. Because if you possess the eye of Agamotto, then the world is in far more danger than I realized." All Might extended a hand. "I am looking for a successor. Someone to inherit my power. But looking at you, perhaps what you need isn't just power. You need a guide." Izuku looked at the hand. He looked at the time stone, which hummed in approval. "The timeline converges here," the stone whispered. Izuku reached out and took All Might's hand. "Okay," Izuku said. "Teach me." And in the pocket of reality, nestled between the seconds, the clock began to tick forward. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple over Mizudafu. The street lights flickered on, buzzing with the electric hum of the city. In a quiet park, sitting on a rusted swing set that squeaked with the gentle evening breeze, the symbol of peace, and the quirkless boy sat in silence. To anyone passing by, it would look absurd. The emaciated, skeletal figure of Toshinori Yagi sat hunched on a swing, his long limbs folded awkwardly, while a green-haired teenager with a heavy bronze necklace stared at his own scarred hands. "So," All Might said, breaking the silence. His voice was gravelly, lacking the booming resonance of his hero persona. "You say that is the Eye of Agamotto?" Izuku nodded, his hand instinctively coming up to cup the relic. It was warm, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic heat that matched his heartbeat. "Yes. It's not a quirk. It's a relic. A singularity." "A singularity," All Might repeated, testing the word. In the golden age of heroes, there were rumors. Before quirks became the norm, when the world was in chaos, there were stories of things that defied explanation. Objects of power. Magic. He looked at Izuku sharply. "I always assumed they were just early manifestations of quirks that people didn't understand yet. But you froze time." "I manipulated the flow of temporal energy," Izuku corrected gently. "It's different from a quirk. A quirk is biological. It uses stamina, calories, muscle fibers. Magic." He looked down at the dirt. "Magic uses the soul. It uses the mind. It pulls energy from other dimensions and forces this reality to bend." All Might leaned forward, his sunken blue eyes intense. "And the cost? You were bleeding from the nose. You looked like you had aged a year in a second." "The bill always comes due," Izuku quoted a line from one of the ancient books he read in his dreams. "If I manipulate time, I pay with my own time. My body takes the strain of the paradoxes I create. If I'm not careful, I could erase myself." The hero went silent again. He looked at his own hand, the one he had offered to Izuku earlier. "I told you about One for All Might said softly. The power to stockpile energy and pass it on. A torch passed from generation to generation." "It sounds lonely," Izuku murmured. "It can be. But it is also a duty. A burden." All Might stood up, his knees cracking. He transformed, steam billowing as he puffed up into his muscular form for just a moment to emphasize his point, before coughing and shrinking back down. "I am looking for a successor, Midoriya. My flame is dying. I need someone to inherit this power. Someone who has the heart of a hero." He pointed a bony finger at Izuku. "I want you to inherit it." Izuku's breath hitched. This was it. The dream. To be the successor of All Might. To have a quirk. To be like everyone else. But then the eye burned against his chest. A sharp, hot spike of warning. "You are the guardian," the voice in his head, not a voice, but a knowing, reminded him. "You stand between the world and the dark dimension. You protect the flow of time." Izuku gripped the chains of the swing. I don't know if I can." All Might blinked, taken aback. "You hesitate? You, who ran into danger without a thought?" "That's exactly why," Izuku said, his voice trembling. "All Might, this stone, it requires incredible focus. It requires my mind to be constantly shielding my body from the energies I channel. If I accept your power, if I accept One for All, what happens if my body breaks? What happens if the power is too much, and I lose control of the stone?" He looked up, terror in his eyes. "If I lose control of a punch, I break a building. If I lose control of the time stone, I could accidentally trap the solar system in a time loop. Or age the earth into dust. Or break the barrier that keeps the mindless ones out." All Might stared at the boy. For the first time, he realized the scale of what sat around the teenager's neck. It wasn't just a cool gadget. It was a loaded gun pointed at the universe. "Young Midoriya," All Might said, his voice softening. "You are afraid that One for All will be the straw that breaks the camel's back." "I'm afraid I'm not strong enough to hold two infinities," Izuku whispered. All Might walked over and placed a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. "One for All is a stockpiling power. It reinforces the body. It makes the vessel stronger. Perhaps, just perhaps, it is exactly what you need." Izuku looked up. "What do you mean?" "You said magic takes a toll on the body," All Might said. "That you pay with your physical form. One for All grants superhuman durability, stamina, and resilience. If you had that power coursing through you, maybe the cost of the stone wouldn't be so high. Maybe one for all could be the battery that keeps your shield up. Izuku's eyes widened. He hadn't thought of that. He had viewed OFA as a burden, another weight. But what if it was a reinforcement? A titanium plating for his glass cannon existence? A guardian needs a shield, All Might smiled. And a hero needs a sword. Why not have both? Izuku looked at the eye. He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, brushing against the consciousness of the stone. Will you accept this? He asked the relic. The stone didn't speak. But it showed him a flash of green and yellow light swirling together. It showed him a tree with roots of gold and leaves of emerald, standing firm against the storm. Integration possible, the concept floated into his mind. Vessel insufficient. Reinforcement required. Izuku opened his eyes. The hesitation was gone, replaced by a steely resolve that made him look far older than 14. Okay, Izuku said. I'll do it. All Might grinned, giving a thumbs up. An immediate answer. That's what I like to hear. But be warned, young Midoriya. This will not be easy. We have 10 months until the UA entrance exam, and in that time, I must mold your body from this. He poked Izuku's soft arm. Into a vessel capable of holding the ultimate power. 10 months, Izuku muttered. He looked at his skinny arms. That's not enough time. It has to be. All Might laughed. Come. Tomorrow, we meet at Dagoba Municipal Beach. Bring a change of clothes, and perhaps a bucket for vomit. The next morning, the reality of the situation set in. Dagoba Municipal Beach was a disaster zone. It wasn't just a beach, it was a monument to apathy. Mountains of trash, tires, appliances, and driftwood stretched as far as the eye could see. Izuku stood in his blue tracksuit, staring at a massive refrigerator that sat atop a pile of scrap metal. This is your first step. All Might shouted, standing atop the fridge in his muscle form, for the benefit of early morning joggers, before poofing down to his skeletal form as the coast cleared. You must clear this section of the beach. It will build your core, your back, your legs, and your spirit. Izuku looked at the fridge. He looked at the miles of trash. Then he looked at All Might. All Might, Izuku said. I appreciate the symbolism. Cleaning the community while building muscle. It's very plus ultra. But purely from a physiological standpoint, I am 166 centimeters and weigh 55 kilograms. If I try to move that fridge right now, I will slip a disc. And even if I work out every day for 10 months, I won't be ready to inherit one for all safely. You said it yourself, if the vessel is weak, the limbs blow off. All Might scratched his head. Well, yes. It's a tight schedule. We'll have to push you to the limit. Maybe a specialized diet. No, Izuku said, reaching for the eye. I have a better way. All Might froze. Midoriya, you cannot use magic to move the trash. That defeats the purpose of the training. You need to build muscle, not just wave your hands. I'm not going to move the trash with magic, Izuku said calmly. He began to trace a pattern in the air with his glowing fingertips. I'm going to buy us time. Time? 10 months isn't enough, Izuku repeated. So, I'm going to make it longer. He brought his hands together, then pulled them apart. A shimmering green dome, transparent and faint, expanded outward, encompassing a 50-meter circle of the trash beach. What is this? All Might asked, stepping back as the dome passed through him. It felt like walking through a cold mist. A temporal distortion field, Izuku explained, his voice taking on that lecture hall tone he used when discussing magic. Inside this dome, time flows differently relative to the outside world. I've set the ratio to roughly 10-1. All Might's jaw dropped. 10-1? For every hour that passes out there, Izuku pointed to the city skyline where cars were moving, 10 hours will pass inside this circle. All Might looked at the cars. They were moving, slowly. Not frozen, but sluggish. A bird flapping its wings looked like it was moving through syrup. Good heavens, All Might whispered. You created a hyperbolic time chamber on a public beach? Essentially, Izuku said. He rubbed his temples. The spell was already giving him a headache. But there's a catch. My body ages at the rate of the inside time. If I spend 10 hours in here, I age 10 hours, even if the world only sees 1 hour pass. And I have to maintain the spell mentally while I train. It's taxing. All Might looked at the boy with a mix of horror and awe. Midoriya, are you sure? That puts an incredible strain on your mind. You'll be training your body to breaking point while your brain is running a marathon. That's the point, Izuku said, walking over to a rusted truck tire. He gripped the rubber. I need to train my focus, All Might. I need to be able to hold the fabric of reality together while my body is screaming in pain. If I can't do that, I can't hold One for All. He lifted the tire. It was heavy. His arms shook. So Izuku grunted, let's get started. We have a lot of years to pack into 10 months. The first month, relative time, 3 months. The training was hell. There was no other word for it. Izuku wasn't just lifting weights. He was lifting weights while solving complex calculus problems in his head, all while holding a magical construct that defied the laws of physics. The routine was brutal. Izuku would activate the field at 5 a.m. real time. He would train inside the bubble for 10 hours. By the time he dropped the field, it was only 6 a.m. real time. He would then go to school, exhausted, his muscles screaming, his mind foggy, All Might worried. He watched from the edge of the distortion field. He couldn't stay inside too long, or his limited hero time would run out relative to the world. He saw Izuku hauling safes, dragging engine blocks, and sprinting through the soft sand. But he also saw the cost. Izuku's nose bled almost constantly during the field activation. The green light of the eye would flicker when Izuku's concentration wavered, causing the gravity inside the dome to fluctuate wildly. Once, Izuku dropped a microwave because the time field hiccuped, causing the microwave to momentarily revert to its component atoms before snapping back. Young Midoriya! Take a break! All Might yelled from outside the distortion, his voice sounding pitched down and slow to Izuku. Inside the bubble, Izuku wiped sweat and blood from his upper lip. I can keep going. He grabbed the rope attached to the pickup truck chassis. He pulled. His hands were blistered. His connection to the stone felt like a live wire sewn into his nervous system. Focus, he told himself. The timeline depends on you. If you are weak, they die. If you are weak, the vision comes true. He had seen it again. The vision. A purple titan. A snap. Dust. He pulled harder. The truck moved. The third month, relative time, 9 months. Izuku was changing. He was no longer the scrawny kid who hid in washing machines. His shoulders had broadened. His back was a map of new muscles. His hands were callous and rough. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They were green, yes, but they had lost that bright, naive shimmer. They were deep, like the ocean floor. When he looked at people, he didn't just look at them. He seemed to look through them, tracking their past and future movements. At school, the bullying had stopped. Not because Bakugo had become nice, but because Izuku had become unnerving. During lunch, Bakugo stormed up to Izuku's desk. Deku! Bakugo slammed his hand down. You've been ghosting me. You think you're better than me just because you're getting buff? Izuku was reading a book. The cover was blank leather, but to Izuku, the title read The Book of Cagliostro. He didn't look up. Not now, Katsuki. I'm reading about the manipulation of astral forms. Stop with the creepy cult crap. Bakugo grabbed the book. Izuku's hand moved. It was a blur. He didn't use magic. He didn't use a time loop. He just used pure, honed reflex. He caught Bakugo's wrist before it touched the book. The class went silent. Izuku looked up slowly. His gaze was heavy. This book creates a cognitive hazard for non-sorcerers. If you touch the pages, your mind might get trapped in a dimension of infinite screaming geometric shapes. Please don't. He released Bakugo's wrist. Bakugo rubbed his arm. He looked at Izuku, really looked at him. He saw the bags under the eyes, the way Izuku's hands trembled slightly when at rest, the sheer weight radiating off him. You! Bakugo whispered. What are you doing to yourself? Preparing, Izuku said, returning to his reading. The 5th month, relative time, 15 months. The magic was evolving. As Izuku's body grew stronger, his ability to channel the stone's energy improved. He wasn't just creating simple time loops anymore. He was integrating magic into his physical movements. On the beach, All Might watched in fascination. Izuku was practicing martial arts, a style All Might didn't recognize. It flowed like water but hit like a hammer. Izuku punched the air. A glowing orange mandala appeared at his fist, expanding on impact to shatter a wooden pallet from a distance. The mystic arts of Kamartage, Izuku explained, breathing heavily. They emphasize using the body's energy to shape reality. Now that I have muscles, I can channel more power without burning out my nerves. Incredible, All Might murmured. You're combining the physical training with sorcery. You're creating a new fighting style. I have to, Izuku said. He took a sip of water. The stone showed me something last night. In a dream, All Might stiffened. A premonition? Maybe. Or a memory of a different timeline. Izuku stared at the ocean. I saw a man who could steal quirks. A man in a dark suit. And I saw you fighting him. All Might went pale. All for one. Is that his name? Izuku asked. In the vision, he was trying to take the stone. He couldn't touch it. It burned him. But he laughed. He said time is just another resource to be stockpiled. Izuku looked at All Might. We have to be ready. He's not dead, is he? All Might sighed, his shoulders slumping. No. I thought I killed him. But, if you saw him, he must be alive. The stone doesn't lie. Then I need to work harder, Izuku said, standing up. Start the timer. The 9th month, relative time, 27 months. The beach was unrecognizable. Where there had once been mountains of trash, there was now pristine white sand. The ocean lapped gently against the shore, free of plastic and oil. The sunrise painted the water in hues of gold and pink. Atop the last pile of trash, a massive, rusted pickup truck, stood Izuku Midoriya. He was shirtless, screaming at the sky. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated effort. He was lifting the truck, not with magic, not with a time loop. With his bare hands, his muscles strained, cords of steel popping against his skin. Sweat poured down his face. His legs shook, digging into the sand. Come on! He roared. With one final heave, he flipped the truck over, sending it crashing onto the flatbed trailer destined for the scrapyard. He collapsed onto his knees, gasping for air. The silence of the beach returned, broken only by the cry of seagulls. All Might walked up the sand. He wasn't in his muscle form. He was just Toshinori, wearing a yellow suit that looked too big for him. He was smiling, a soft, proud smile. You did it, All Might said. And with a month to spare, Izuku rolled onto his back, looking up at the clouds. I feel heavy. That is muscle, my boy. The armor of a hero. All Might laughed, offering a handkerchief. Izuku took it. He sat up. He looked at his hands. They were scarred, calloused, and strong. For the first time in his life, he felt like he occupied space. He wasn't a ghost anymore. Izuku did the mental math. I spent almost 3 years in those loops, subjectively. I'm 14 on my birth certificate, but I feel 17. Does the stone burden you still? All Might asked. Izuku touched the eye. It's quiet. It respects the work. It knows the vessel is ready. All Might nodded solemnly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single strand of long, golden hair. Then it is time, All Might said. The entrance exam is in 2 weeks. But your body is ready now. He held the hair out to Izuku. Midoriya Izuku. You have proven yourself worthy. You have cleaned this beach, not for glory, but for duty. You have trained your mind and your body to the breaking point. You are the guardian of time. And now, you shall be the successor of power. All Might grinned, the familiar shadow falling over his face. Eat this. Izuku stared at the hair. The gravity of the moment was somewhat undercut by the absurdity of the request. I have to eat it? Izuku asked, his face scrunching up. DNA ingestion? That's the mechanism? It's the fastest way. All Might said defensively. Don't overthink the science. Just accept the power. Izuku sighed. He stood up. He took the hair. He looked at the eye of Agamotto one last time. Here goes nothing, he thought. He put the hair in his mouth and swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. Does it take time to digest? Izuku asked, feeling foolish. Give it a. All Might started. Then, the world screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a sensation. Like a thunderclap inside Izuku's bone marrow. Izuku gasped, clutching his stomach. A burning heat, distinct from the cool hum of the stone, erupted in his gut. It felt like he had swallowed a star. It raced through his veins, electric and wild. Yellow lightning crackled around his body. Arg! Izuku cried out, falling to his knees. The power of One for All, stockpiled by 8 generations of heroes, was flooding his system, seeking every nook and cranny of his newfound musculature. But then, the stone woke up. Sensing a massive influx of foreign energy, the eye of Agamotto snapped open. Green energy exploded from Izuku's chest. Midoriya! All Might shouted, shielding his eyes. The two energies collided. The yellow lightning of One for All, representing raw physical power and kinetic energy. The green mandalas of the Time Stone, representing cosmic order and temporal manipulation. They didn't fight. They fused. Izuku's back arched. His eyes rolled back, glowing pure white. He wasn't on the beach anymore. He was floating in a void. In front of him stood 8 shadowy figures, the vestiges of One for All. They were glowing with golden light, but above them, a massive, singular green eye opened in the darkness of the void. It was the consciousness of the stone. The vestiges looked up at the eye in awe. The vessel accepts the gift, the stone's voice boomed, vibrating through the void. The physical meets the temporal. The circuit is complete. One of the vestiges, a man with white hair, stepped forward. This boy, he brings a power we have never seen. He is bridging the gap between quirks and the cosmos. Izuku felt himself being pulled in 2 directions. His muscles felt like they were being knit with steel wire. His mind felt like it was being expanded to the edges of the universe. Synchronizing, a robotic voice, perhaps the stone, perhaps the quirk, echoed. One for All, 1%. Temporal sync stable. Boom. Izuku slammed back into reality. He was lying on the sand. Smoke was rising from his body. The sand around him had turned to glass, not from heat, but from being rapidly aged and crystallized in an instant. All Might was kneeling beside him, looking terrified. Midoriya! Speak to me. Are you alright? Izuku coughed. He sat up slowly. He looked at his hand. Small sparks of yellow lightning danced across his skin. But woven into the lightning were tiny, intricate green runes. When the lightning jumped, it didn't just crackle, it left a trail, a visual echo of where the spark had been and where it would be. Izuku clenched his fist. The power was immense. It felt like he could punch a hole in the sky. But more importantly, the mental fog, the constant, draining fatigue of the stone, was gone. The stockpile of One for All was feeding the stone. The stone was stabilizing the overflow of One for All. It was a perfect symbiosis. Izuku looked up at All Might. His eyes were glowing with a mixture of emerald and gold. I'm okay, Izuku said, his voice echoing slightly as if 2 people were speaking at once. I'm ready. All Might let out a breath he had been holding for 10 months. You scared me, kid. For a second there, I thought you were going to explode. I think I almost did, Izuku admitted. He stood up, feeling lighter than air. But they shook hands. The power and the relic. They like each other. He looked at the rising sun. The UA entrance exam was approaching. The villains were waiting. The timeline was fragile, but for the first time, Izuku didn't feel like just a guardian watching the world from behind a glass wall. He felt like a participant. Let's go, All Might, Izuku smiled, and the sheer confidence in it reminded Tashinori of his own master, Nana Shimura. We have an exam to crush. 2 weeks later. The day of the exam. The gates of UA High School towered over the students. Thousands of hopefuls streamed in, nervous energy palpable in the air. Izuku walked through the crowd. He wore his middle school uniform, but he moved with a grace that belonged to a warrior monk. The eye of Agamotto was tucked safely under his shirt, but its presence was a comforting weight. Out of my way, Deku! Bakugo marched past him, bumping his shoulder. Don't think just because you got buff you can stand in my ring. I'm going to crush this exam. Izuku didn't stumble. He barely moved. He watched Bakugo walk away. In 14 million outcomes, he always says that, Izuku thought with a faint smile. He took a step forward and tripped. His foot caught on a cobblestone. Gravity took hold. Great, Izuku thought. Guardian of time, wielder of one for all, defeated by a piece of pavement. He prepared to catch himself with a spell, maybe a localized gravity reversal, but he stopped himself. No magic in public unless necessary. No quirks until the practical. He waited for the impact. It never came. He was floating. Are you okay? A bubbly voice. A girl with brown hair and rosy cheeks. She had tapped him, her pinky raised. It's my quirk, she smiled. Sorry for using it on you without asking. But it's bad luck to fall on the first day, right? Izuku righted himself as she released the gravity. He looked at her. Ochako Uraraka. The stone pulsed. A vision flashed, debris falling. A giant robot. This girl trapped. Pain. Izuku blinked the vision away. Thank you, Izuku said, bowing politely. That was timely. I'm Uraraka. Good luck. She waved and ran off toward the orientation hall. Izuku watched her go. He clenched his fist, feeling the hum of one for all waiting to be unleashed. Bad luck to fall, Izuku repeated. He touched the eye. Luck is just probability taken personally. I don't need luck. He looked at the towering glass building of UA. I have time. He walked through the gates. The first step of his journey, and the timeline, had truly begun. The written exam was, ironically, the easiest part of the day. For a normal student, the prestigious UA High School entrance exam was a grueling marathon of advanced mathematics, literary analysis, and hero laws. But Izuku Midoriya was not a normal student. He was a boy who had spent the last 10 months living inside a time dilation field. He hadn't just studied for 10 months. Technically, he had been studying for nearly 3 years of subjective time. He stared at the final question on the math sheet, a complex calculus problem regarding the trajectory of a villain's projectile influenced by a gravity quirk. Izuku didn't just calculate it. He visualized it. The numbers floated off the page, rearranging themselves into glowing green glyphs in his mind's eye. He solved it in seconds, put his pencil down, and looked at the clock. 30 minutes remaining. He closed his eyes and meditated. In the quiet dark of the exam hall, the eye of Agamotto hung heavy against his sternum, a silent, thrumming presence. It was calm today. The timeline was stable. The chaotic energy of the future was, for the moment, a straight line. But chaos always waits at the turn of the hour, the stone whispered into his subconscious. When the bell rang, Izuku gathered his things. He caught the eye of Katsuki Bakugo across the aisle. Bakugo glared, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He had been watching Izuku closely since the sludge villain incident. He knew something was different, something beyond just Deku worked out. Izuku offered a small, polite nod, which only seemed to infuriate Bakugo further, before heading to the auditorium. Everybody say hey. Present Mix's voice was a sonic weapon in its own right, booming through the massive lecture hall. The response was a tepid, nervous silence from thousands of examinees. Tough crowd. The voice hero shrugged. All right, examinees. Let me break down the rundown on the practical exam. Are you ready? As Mike explained the rules, 3 types of robots, points based on difficulty, 10 minutes to wreak havoc, Izuku muttered under his breath. 10 minutes. 600 seconds. A limited window favors speed-type quirks and wide-range emitters. Physical types will have to manage stamina. If I use a localized time slow on the robots, I can dismantle them, but that consumes too much mental energy per unit. Efficient pathing is key. Excuse me, a hand shot up in the row below him. It was a tall boy with glasses and engines in his calves. He stood up with rigid, robotic precision. Sir. The handout clearly lists 4 types of villains, not 3. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed of such a foolish error. The boy spun around, pointing a stiff finger directly at Izuku. And you! With the curly hair, Izuku blinked, pointing at himself. Me? You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting. If you're here to mess around, then you should leave immediately. The auditorium giggled. Izuku felt the heat rise to his cheeks. I'm sorry, Izuku said, his voice quiet but carrying a strange resonance. I was merely calculating the chrono-efficiency of the engagement. I won't speak again. The boy with glasses paused, seemingly thrown off by the odd choice of words, but sat down. Okay. Present Mike waved his hands. Thank you, exam number 7111. The fourth robot is a 0-pointer. Think of it as a gimmick. A hurdle. It's not worth any points, so my advice? Run away, Izuku thought. A test of avoidance. The stone pulsed. A flash of a vision, dust, a scream, a piece of rubble crushing a leg. Izuku frowned. The test wasn't just about avoidance. It never was. Battle Center B. The gates to the mock city were massive, towering structures of steel and concrete. A crowd of students stood before them, stretching their limbs and psyching themselves up. Izuku stood at the back. He wore a simple teal tracksuit. He checked the bandages on his arms, wrist wraps he had imbued with protective runes to help brace his joints against the recoil of One for All. He looked at his hands. I have One for All, he reminded himself. But I can't use it. During the last week of training, he had tried to use 5% of the power. He had shattered a boulder, but he had also hairline fractured his radius. His body, though muscular, wasn't naturally adapted to the quirk yet. If he used it now, he would break himself before he scored a single point. I have to rely on the arts, Izuku decided. And the stone. And start. Present Mick's voice blared from the tower. The students hesitated, looking confused. There was no countdown. What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights. Run! The die is cast. While the other students were processing the command, Izuku was already gone. He didn't run. He stepped. He focused on the space 10 meters ahead of him. He visualized the seconds between now and the moment he would arrive there. He pinched the fabric of time between his thumb and forefinger, metaphorically speaking, and skipped the intervening space. Zip. One moment he was at the back of the pack. The next, he was 20 meters inside the city, leaving a faint green afterimage behind him. What was that? A student yelled. Teleportation? Izuku didn't answer. He turned a corner and found his first target. A 1-pointer. A basic drone on treads. It locked onto him, its red eye glowing. Target acquired. It lunged. Izuku didn't flinch. The stone was already active. To Izuku, the robot was moving in slow motion. He could see the hydraulic pistons compressing before the strike. He could see the electrical signal traveling down the robot's arm. Dodge left. Strike the joint. Izuku sidestepped effortlessly. As the robot passed him, he didn't use a smash. He used a precise, open palm strike infused with orange eldritch energy. Mandala strike. The glowing geometric disc slammed into the robot's neck joint. It wasn't a brute force attack. The magic disrupted the electrical current, freezing the localized time of the robot's CPU. The robot sparked and collapsed, lifeless. 1 point, Izuku exhaled. Too slow. He took off running. 5 minutes passed. The city was a chaotic war zone. Explosions echoed from the east block, likely Bakugo or someone with a similar heavy-hitter quirk. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Izuku was panting. He had 28 points. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't amazing. The problem was his damage output. Without One for All, dismantling the heavily armored 3-pointers was difficult. He had to rely on redirecting their own missiles back at them using small portals or tripping them into buildings. It was efficient, but it wasn't flashy. And in the hero world, flashiness counted. Out of the way, a student with a laser navel blasted past him, vaporizing a robot Izuku was about to engage. Merci! The boy shouted. Izuku gritted his teeth. I'm falling behind. The magic requires too much setup. The quirks are instant. He turned a corner and found himself face to face with a 3-pointer. This one was massive, a scorpion-like tail raised high. It struck. Izuku raised his hand. Shield of the Seraphim. A complex, multi-layered mandala of orange light manifested in the air. The metal tail slammed into it with a deafening gong sound. The shield held, but the impact shuddered through Izuku's bones. It's heavy, Izuku thought, sweat stinging his eyes. Maintaining the shield takes focus. The robot pulled back for a second strike. Izuku saw the opening. The underbelly. He dropped the shield and slid underneath the robot. He placed his hand on the chassis. Time acceleration. He focused the stone's energy on the bolts holding the armor plating together. For a split second, he accelerated the entropy of the metal by 100 years. The bolts rusted and crumbled to dust instantly. The armor plate fell off with a clang. Izuku rolled out, grabbed a piece of rebar from the rubble, and jammed it into the exposed wiring. The robot spasmed and died. 31 points, Izuku wheezed, wiping blood from his nose. Using entropy magic was dangerous. It flirted too close to the dark arts. Warning, the stone pulsed hot against his chest. Temporal disturbance detected. The ground began to shake. Not a rumble. An earthquake. Buildings swayed. Glass shattered. A shadow fell over the main avenue, blocking out the sun. Izuku looked up. And up. And up. The 0-pointer. It was colossal. A moving skyscraper of green metal and malice. Its treads crushed cars like soda cans. Its mere movement generated wind pressure that knocked students off their feet. This is a gimmick? Someone screamed. Run! Run for your lives. The examinees broke. Panic took over. The orderly chaos of the exam dissolved into a stampede of terror. Izuku stood frozen. His logical brain, the one that analyzed hero fights, was screaming. There are no points. The risk is absolute. The strategic move is to retreat to the entrance. He turned to run. Oh wow! The sound was faint, buried under the roar of the machine and the screams of the crowd. But the stone heard it. The stone amplified it. Izuku stopped. He looked back. Through the dust and debris he saw her. The girl with the rosy cheeks. The gravity girl. She was on the ground, struggling. A massive piece of concrete rubble had pinned her leg. She was trying to lift it, but she was exhausted, her face pale with nausea. The 0-pointer loomed over her. Its massive mechanical hand was reaching down, not to grab, but to crush the street in front of it to propel itself forward. She was directly in its path. She will die, the stone stated coldly. In this timeline, without intervention, the probability of survival is 0.0001%. Izuku looked at the fleeing students. Even the fast ones, the engine boy, the laser boy, were running away. Heroes. Izuku whispered. Heroes don't run. The logic vanished. The fear vanished. Izuku moved. He sprinted toward the Titan. Hey! Kid! Don't be an idiot! A student yelled. Izuku didn't hear him. He was doing calculations at the speed of light. Distance, 40 meters. Enemy size, colossal. Magic required immense. Physicality required, absolute. He couldn't destroy this thing with a rusted bolt. He couldn't trip it. He couldn't shield against it. He needed power. Raw, unadulterated power. He needed one for all. All Might said my body isn't ready for 100%, Izuku thought as he leaped over a crushed car. If I use it, my limbs will explode, unless... An idea formed. A desperate, insane idea born from a mind that had studied the Book of Cagliostro while doing push-ups. Izuku planted his feet on the pavement, directly in the shadow of the descending fist. One for all. He felt the stockpile. The ocean of golden fire. He grabbed it. He didn't try to regulate it to 5%. He grabbed all of it. Full cowl. No! He channeled the power into his legs. Boom! The pavement beneath him vaporized. Izuku shot into the air like a missile. The G-force alone threatened to black him out. He soared upward, past the robot's knees, past its torso, until he was level with its metallic face. He was floating in the air. The massive faceplate of the 0-pointer was right there, but he was falling. Gravity was taking hold. And his arm, he needed to punch. If I punch now, Izuku gritted his teeth, the yellow lightning crackling violently around his right arm, tearing the sleeve of his tracksuit. The recoil will shatter my shoulder and arm. I'll pass out from the pain before I hit the ground. He needed a cushion. He needed to cheat physics. Izuku's eyes glowed blindingly green. He reached into his shirt and grabbed the eye. Eye of Agamotto! He screamed the invocation. He twisted his wrist. The world turned gray. Time freeze. Everything stopped. The dust hanging in the air froze. The sound of the robot's engines cut out instantly. The birds in the sky were suspended. The robot itself was a statue. Izuku was suspended in midair, carried only by his own existing momentum, which was now preserved in the stasis. Inside the frozen time, the pain of one for all hadn't hit yet. The energy was stockpiled in his arm, screaming to be released, but physics was on pause. I have 3 seconds of subjective time, before my brain fries, Izuku gasped. His nose erupted in blood, floating as red spheres in the gray void. He pulled his arm back. He focused the yellow lightning. He focused the green magic. He didn't just punch the robot. He punched the space where the robot existed in time. Detroit. He threw the punch. His fist connected with the metal faceplate. Normally, the metal would crumple. But time was frozen. The atoms couldn't move. They couldn't displace. So, the kinetic energy of the smash had nowhere to go. It couldn't disperse. It just sat there. Infinite kinetic potential trapped in a single point of contact. Izuku screamed as the feedback loop hit him. Even in frozen time, Newton's third law was a suggestion he was violently violating. Smayawash. He pushed off the robot. Resume. He snapped his fingers with his left hand. Crack. Time restarted. And the universe caught up. The accumulated force of a 100% one-for-all smash, which had been held in stasis for 3 seconds, was released in a single nanosecond. It wasn't a punch. It was a nuclear detonation of kinetic force. The zero-pointer didn't just break. It atomized. The head of the robot disintegrated into a cloud of metallic dust. The shockwave blew a hole through the clouds above the city. The torso crumbled, the metal groaning as it was twisted by invisible torque. Down below, the windows of every building within a mile shattered. Izuku was launched backward by the recoil. And then, the pain arrived. Arg. His right arm was purple. Broken. Twisted. His legs, which had taken the jump, were flailing uselessly. He was falling from the sky. I did it, Izuku thought, his vision darkening. But I'm going to die. He fell past the crumbling robot. The ground was rushing up fast. Too tired to cast a portal. Too tired to rewind. He closed his eyes. Slap. A hand touched his cheek. Release. Izuku stopped falling just inches from the ground. He hovered there, weightless, before gently dropping onto the concrete. He gasped for air, clutching his shattered arm. He looked up. Uraraka was there. She was leaning over him, pale and shaking, holding her own stomach to keep from vomiting. She had used her quirk on him at the last second. You! She wheezed. You saved me. Izuku tried to smile, but all that came out was a groan. You saved me, too. He looked at his arm. It was bad. The stone, he thought hazily. Fix it. He tried to activate a time reversal on his arm. A small green mandala appeared over the purple bruise. Rewind, just the injury. The green light washed over his arm. The bones cracked and shifted, realigning. The purple bruising faded slightly. But then, the yellow lightning sparked. One for all rejected the reversal. The power was part of him now. The injury was a consequence of his own body's limit, not an external attack. The stone couldn't fully undo the cost of magic, or the cost of one for all. Izuku screamed as the bone set itself into a fracture rather than a shatter. It was still broken, but it wasn't pulverized. Time's up. Present Mick's voice blared. The siren wailed. Izuku let his head fall back against the pavement. He stared at the blue sky. 0 points, he whispered. I failed. The infirmary. Good heavens, recovery girl muttered, looking at the X-rays. Izuku sat on the bed, his arm in a sling. He felt drained. Not just tired, but hollowed out. Using the time freeze alongside one for all had burned through his glucose levels and his spiritual stamina. Your arm, the old woman said, tapping the screen. It shows signs of a compound fracture that healed? And then broke again? It's the strangest bone density scan I've ever seen. I have a regenerative factor, Izuku lied. It was easier than explaining he had locally reversed the entropy of his humerus. Well, it's exhausted, she scolded. And so are you. I've used my quirk to patch up the rest, but you'll need rest. A lot of it. She handed him a gummy candy. That punch, she said, eyeing him. It reminded me of All Might. But the way the robot fell apart, it looked like it aged 1,000 years in a second. Izuku chewed the gummy. It was a critical hit. The door opened. All Might poked his head in. He was in his skeletal form, looking anxious. Young Midoriya? I'm okay, Izuku said. All Might walked in, closing the door. I watched the feeds. That was reckless. And magnificent. I got 0 points, Izuku said, staring at his knees. I destroyed the big one, but that doesn't count. I failed the exam, All Might. I wasted your power, All Might laughed. It was a wheezy, soft sound. You think you failed? All Might shook his head. Midoriya, do you remember what I told you? A hero's body moves before he can think. Yeah, the judges saw that. They saw you jump when others ran. They saw you sacrifice your score, and your arm, to save one person. All Might reached into his pocket and pulled out a holographic projector. I wasn't supposed to tell you this yet, but I can't stand seeing that long face. He clicked the button. A projection of the scoreboard appeared. Villain points 31, rescue points 60, total 91. Izuku's eyes widened. Rescue points? A hidden metric. All Might grinned. How can a hero course reject someone who saves lives? You didn't just pass, Midoriya. You crushed it. Izuku looked at the score. Tears welled up in his eyes, real tears, not time-looped ones. I have a school? You have a hero academia, All Might corrected. Welcome to UA, April. The first day. The hallways of UA were huge. The doors were tall. Everything was designed for giants. Izuku walked toward Class 1A. He wore the gray uniform, the eye of Agamotto hidden beneath the blazer. He felt prepared. He opened the massive door. Remove your foot from that desk. It is disrespectful to the upperclassmen who crafted it. Ha! Stop telling me what to do, Four Eyes, Ida and Bakugo. Of course, Izuku sighed. He stepped in. The room went silent. Bakugo stared at him. Ida turned, marching toward him. You! Ida chopped the air. Midoriya! I misjudged you. You perceived the true nature of the exam while I was blinded by the surface rules. I, Tenya Ida, acknowledge you. Thanks, Izuku said, sweating. Deku, Uraraka appeared behind him, beaming. You made it. And your arm is okay. Yeah, Recovery Girl is amazing, Izuku smiled. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. A man in a yellow sleeping bag was lying in the doorway like a caterpillar. He stood up, shedding the bag, revealing a tired man with messy black hair and bloodshot eyes. Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead. Izuku stiffened. He knew this hero. An underground legend. His quirk, erasure. He could turn off quirks just by looking at someone. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa, the man deadpanned. Put these on and meet me on the field. He held up a gym uniform. The field? Uraraka asked. What about orientation? UA is a freestyle school, Aizawa said. We don't have time for ceremonies. The PE grounds. A quirk apprehension test, Aizawa announced. 8 events. The student who places last has 0 potential and will be expelled. Expelled? The class shouted. On the first day, natural disasters, villain attacks. The world isn't fair, Aizawa muttered. UA isn't fair. Now, Midoriya. He threw a softball to Izuku. You finished first in the practical. Aizawa lied. It was technically Bakugo on villain points, but Midoriya had the impact. How far could you throw in middle school? 40 meters, Izuku said. Try it with your quirk. Anything goes as long as you stay in the circle. Izuku walked to the circle. The class watched. Bakugo watched with narrowed eyes. Izuku held the ball. He had a choice. Use one for all? No. He couldn't control it without breaking his finger. If he broke his finger now, Aizawa would fail him for being a liability. Use the stone. Izuku took a deep breath. He held the ball in his right hand. He began to channel the green energy. He wound up. Spell, Vectors of Watum. A wind boost. Spell, Temporal Acceleration. reducing the air resistance to 0 by aging the air in front of the ball. His eyes glowed green. Smash! He threw the ball. Suddenly, the green light vanished. The energy in his arm dissipated instantly. The ball left his hand with only the force of a normal teenager who lifted weights. It flew 46 meters. Izuku blinked. He looked at his hands. The magic was gone. The connection to the stone felt severed? No, not severed. Suppressed. He looked back. Aizawa was staring at him. His hair was floating. His eyes were glowing red. I erased your quirk, Aizawa said, his voice cold. That entrance exam, you broke your arm with massive power. But just now, you were trying to use some kind of glowing light show. What was that? Izuku stared at Aizawa. Then he realized. He thinks the magic is my quirk. But here was the thing. Aizawa's quirk, erasure, worked by halting the genetic quirk factors in a person's body. It shut down the biological mechanism. Magic wasn't biological. The stone wasn't a mutation. It was a cosmic singularity. Izuku looked down at the eye beneath his shirt. It was still thrumming. Aizawa hadn't turned it off. He couldn't. The reason the spell failed was because Izuku flinched. Aizawa's gaze carried an intense psychological pressure, an intimidation factor. Izuku had lost his concentration when he felt the erasure hit him, causing the spell to fizzle. You can't control your power, Aizawa scolded, walking closer. You're a liability. If you break your arm again, you're useless. Do you intend to become a hero who needs saving? Aizawa's scarf floated around him. I returned your quirk. Try again. And if you don't show me something real, you're gone. Aizawa blinked. His hair fell. Izuku looked at the ball. He looked at Aizawa. He thinks he erased it, Izuku realized. He thinks he has power over the stone. A spark of defiance lit up in Izuku's chest. You didn't erase anything, Izuku whispered. What? Aizawa asked. Izuku picked up the ball. He walked back to the circle. He didn't use one for all. He didn't need to break his finger to prove a point. He placed the ball in his palm. He closed his eyes. He visualized the timeline where the ball was already in the stratosphere. He opened his eyes. They burned with emerald fire. By the hoary hosts of Hoggoth, Izuku didn't throw the ball. He punched it. But as he punched, a golden-orange portal opened in front of his fist, about the size of a dinner plate. And another portal opened 500 meters in the air. The ball entered the first portal. It exited the second with its momentum preserved. But Izuku wasn't done. As the ball exited the high-altitude portal, Izuku clenched his fist. Time loop. The ball fell for a second. Then it reset to the portal exit. Fell again. Reset. Fell again. He was building gravitational potential energy. Stacking it. After 10 loops in the span of a second, he released the loop and opened a third portal angled horizontally. The ball shot out toward the horizon like a railgun slug. Boom! The sonic boom shook the trees. The ball disappeared into the sky. Aizawa stared at his phone. The device beeped. 705.3 meters. Izuku turned around. He wasn't panting. He wasn't broken. Aizawa was standing there, his eyes wide. He had tried to use erasure again the moment the portal opened. He had been staring right at Izuku. I erased it, Aizawa whispered, visibly shaken. I was looking right at you. My quirk was active. I know, Izuku said calmly. He adjusted his collar, hiding the eye. But my power isn't a quirk, Aizawa-sensei. It's not something you can turn off. The class gasped. Not a quirk? Ida whispered. Then what is it? Magic, Izuku said simply. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. Magic doesn't exist. There is only science and quirks. That, Izuku said, walking back to the group, is a very narrow view of the universe. He stopped next to Bakugo, who was trembling with rage and confusion. Your turn, Kaken, Izuku said softly. Aizawa stared at the boy. For the first time in years, the erasure hero felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He looked at the reading on his phone. He defied the laws of biology, Aizawa thought. If he can ignore erasure, then he is the most dangerous student I have ever seen. Midoriya, Aizawa called out. Izuku stopped. Don't get cocky. You still have 7 events. Izuku smiled. I have time. The bus ride to the unforeseen simulation joint, USJ, was filled with the nervous, excited chatter of heroes in training. For Class 1A, this was their first real field trip, a step away from the sterile classrooms of UA and into the messy reality of rescue work. Izuku Midoriya sat near the back, looking out the window. The scenery blurred past, but to his eyes it looked different. Since inheriting One for All and bonding it with the eye of Agamotto, his perception of the world had shifted permanently. He didn't just see trees and roads, he saw the faint, shimmering trails of their temporal existence. The world was a tapestry of threads, weaving together into the present moment. Midoriya-chan? Izuku blinked, the green glow in his irises fading slightly as he turned to face Tsuyu Ajiri. The frog girl was staring at him with her large, inquisitive eyes. "Oh, Ajiri-san. Is something wrong?" "Call me Tsuyu," she corrected bluntly. "I generally say what's on my mind. And I was thinking about your power." The bus went quiet. Ears perked up. Even Bakugo, sitting a few rows ahead, stopped yelling at Kaminari to listen. "You said at the physical exam that it's not a quirk," Tsuyu continued, tapping her chin. "You called it magic. But magic isn't scientific. It's a fairy tale. Yet, you destroyed the zero-pointer with a punch that looked like it broke the sound barrier, and you threw a ball through a portal. It resembles All Might's power, but with extra steps." Izuku gripped the strap of his backpack. The eye of Agamotto felt heavy against his chest, a warm weight of bronze and destiny. "It's not All Might's power," Izuku said carefully. "It wasn't a lie, the magic wasn't. And magic, well, science is just magic we understand. Magic is science we haven't written the equations for yet. So it's a quirk that manipulates energy fields?" Kirishima asked from across the aisle, hardening his arm excitedly. "That's so manly. Like a wizard style." "Something like that," Izuku murmured. "Whatever it is," Bakugo growled, not turning around, "it's flashy garbage. If you rely on tricks, you'll die when a real villain shows up." Izuku looked at the back of Bakugo's head. He resisted the urge to check the timeline. The stone had been restless all morning, sending him flashes of static images, shattered glass, water, a decaying hand, a bird with exposed brains. "We're here." Aizawa's voice cut through the tension. The bus hissed to a halt. The USJ was a marvel of engineering. A massive dome housing distinct disaster zones, shipwrecks, landslides, fires, and squalls. Standing at the entrance was the space hero, 13. As 13 began their speech about the dangers of quirks and the importance of rescue, Izuku felt a sudden, sharp drop in atmospheric pressure. It wasn't weather. It was ontological. The reality of the room was thinning. "Warning," the stone pulsed. "The barrier is breached." "Sensei!" Izuku shouted, interrupting 13. Aizawa turned, annoyed. "Midoriya, don't get back!" Izuku stepped forward, his hands already moving in intricate patterns, orange sparks dancing at his fingertips. "Someone is forcing the timeline open." Before anyone could ask what he meant, the lights in the massive dome flickered and died. In the center of the central plaza, down the long staircase, space began to warp. It wasn't a portal like Kurogiri's usual mist. It was a violent tear. A swirling vortex of purple and black expanded, crackling with malevolent energy. A hand reached out. Pale, covered in disembodied hands. Then a face. "Shigaraki Tamura." Eraserhead and 13, a scratchy voice echoed through the silent dome. "The teacher's schedule we received said All Might was supposed to be here." Dozens of villains poured out of the portal behind him. Thugs, mutants, and criminals with jagged weapons. The trespassing the other day was the work of these scumbags. Aizawa's scarf floated up, his eyes narrowing. 13. Protect the students. Villains? Mineta shrieked. "No way. There's no way they could get into UA. They're glitching," Shigaraki muttered, scratching his neck violently. He looked up at the students, his eyes scanning the crowd. "The NPCs? Why aren't they panicked enough? Where is the final boss?" Izuku stood at the top of the stairs. The stone was screaming now. This wasn't just a riot. This was an assassination attempt. "Sensei, you can't fight them all," Izuku called out as Aizawa prepared to jump. "I can see the probabilities. The odds of a frontal assault succeeding are less than 4%. Aizawa looked back, his eyes glowing red. A hero doesn't care about odds, Midoriya. He cares about saving lives. Aizawa leaped. He descended into the horde like a whirlwind. He erased quirks, captured villains in his binding cloth, and moved with a fluidity that defied age. Amazing, Sato gasped. We have to go! Ida yelled. To the exit! The class turned to run, but the air in front of them condensed into a wall of dark purple mist. I am afraid I cannot allow that, a refined voice spoke from the fog. Two glowing yellow eyes appeared. We are the League of Villains. We have invited ourselves in to have All Might take his last breath. Kurogyri. The warp gate. Damn you! Bakugo and Kirishima launched themselves at the mist. Explosions and hardened fists tore through the fog, but they hit nothing. Danger, Kurogyri noted. You children are golden eggs. But you must be scattered. The mist expanded, wrapping around the class like a shroud. Izuku felt the ground disappear. Warping space, Izuku analyzed instantly. Coordinates shifting. He didn't panic. He reached for the eye. Anchor myself? No. Let it happen. The others need help. Darkness swallowed him. The flood zone, shipwreck zone. The sensation of teleportation was nauseating, like being pulled through a straw. Splash. Izuku hit cold water. He was submerged instantly. The shock of the cold was immediate, but his training in the time dilation bubble had hardened him against extremes. He opened his eyes underwater. Through the murky blue, he saw shapes approaching. Villains with aquatic quirks, sharks, squids, sirens. They were swimming toward him with predatory speed. An easy kill. One of them bubbled, bearing rows of serrated teeth. Izuku held his breath. He brought his hands together in the water. The resistance of the liquid made the somatic gestures slower, more deliberate. Spell, the chains of Kraken. He thrust his palms outward. Golden chains of magical energy erupted from his hands, snake-like and glowing. They didn't move like physical objects, they ignored drag. They lashed out, wrapping around the villains' tails and fins. What the? Izuku yanked. The villains were slammed into each other with a dull underwater thud. He kicked his legs, enhanced by the passive 5% of one for all he now maintained constantly, and rocketed to the surface. He broke the water, gasping for air. Midoriya-chan! A long tongue wrapped around his waist and pulled him onto the deck of a sinking ship. Tsuyu dropped him gently next to a shivering Mineta. Thanks, Tsuyu, Izuku coughed, water dripping from his curls. This is bad. We're gonna die. Mineta was hyperventilating. Those guys in the water, they're waiting for us. We're trapped. Izuku stood up and looked over the railing. The ship was surrounded. Dozens of villains circled like sharks. They aren't attacking the ship directly, Izuku observed. They're waiting for it to sink or for us to jump. They're cautious. Cautious? They're monsters! Mineta cried. No, Izuku's eyes glowed green. They're unsure. They don't know our quirks. That gives us an advantage. He looked at the water. He touched the eye of Agamotto. Post-cognition, he commanded. The world flickered. For a split second, Izuku didn't see the villains where they were now. He saw where they were 10 seconds ago. He saw the currents they had ridden. He saw the formation they had used to surround the boat. I see their paths, Izuku whispered. They're moving in a counterclockwise rotation to create a vortex, trying to drag the ship down faster. What do we do? Tsuyu asked, trusting him immediately. Izuku looked at Mineta. Mineta-kun, your spheres. Do they float? Yeah, and they stick to anything. Good, Izuku said. Tsuyu, I need you to jump. Take Mineta. What about you? I'm going to create an opening. A big one. Izuku stepped onto the railing. When I signal jump, Izuku raised his right hand. He didn't clench a fist for a smash. He held his fingers in a specific arrangement, thumb and middle finger touching, index finger extended. He focused on the water directly in the center of the villain's formation. Mineta, throw your balls into the water. Now! Mineta screamed but obeyed, hurling dozens of purple sticky spheres into the ocean. Tsuyu, jump! As his friends leaped into the air, Izuku jumped with them. But as he fell toward the water, he activated the stone. By the 7 sons of Cinnabis, he didn't fire an energy blast. He targeted the water molecules in the center of the villain's vortex. Temporal freeze. He froze a sphere of water, 10 meters wide, right in the center. The villains, who were swimming at high speeds around this center point, suddenly had their path blocked by an immovable object. Water that had become as hard as diamond because it was frozen in time. Crash. The villains slammed into the frozen water at full speed. It was like driving a car into a concrete wall. Arg! Bodies went limp. The impact stunned them. Now! Izuku yelled. As the villains floated dazed, Mineta's balls bobbed in the water, sticking them together in a massive, chaotic raft of unconscious criminals. Izuku landed on the frozen patch of water. It held his weight perfectly. He grabbed Tsuyu and Mineta as they landed. Release, he whispered. The water unfroze. But the villains were already stuck together, a groaning mass of defeat. That was... Mineta stared, jaw dropped. That was magic! Let's move, Izuku said, looking toward the central plaza. His expression darkened. Sensei is in trouble. The central plaza. Aizawa was fighting a losing battle. He was exhausted. His goggles were cracked. His breathing was ragged. He had taken down 40 villains, but Shigaraki was different. You're cool, Eraserhead, Shigaraki rasped, dodging a capture scarf. But looking at you, your hair falls every time you blink. Your intervals are getting shorter. You're getting dry-eye, aren't you? Aizawa didn't answer. He threw a punch. Shigaraki caught his elbow. Game over. Decay spread instantly. The fabric of Aizawa's suit disintegrated. His skin turned gray and cracked. Gah! Aizawa pulled back, but the damage was done. His elbow was flayed, and now, Shigaraki pointed behind Aizawa. Meet the anti-symbol of peace, the Nomu. The hulking beast, with its exposed brain and beak-like mouth, appeared silently. It moved with speed that belied its size. Before Aizawa could turn, the Nomu grabbed him. Snap! The sound of Aizawa's arm breaking echoed through the plaza. Sensei, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta had just reached the shore. They watched from the reeds as the Nomu slammed Aizawa's head into the concrete. Crack! No! Tsuyu whispered, terrified. Izuku felt the timeline shudder. Critical point, the stone warned. Subject, Aizawa Shota. Status, approaching termination. Izuku watched Shigaraki laughing. He watched the Nomu raising its fist for a killing blow. He looked at his own hands. He had promised All Might he would be a successor. He had promised to protect the timeline. If Aizawa died here, UA would close. The students would be demoralized. The future where the villains won would become a certainty. Stay here, Izuku commanded. Midoriya, don't! Mineta grabbed his leg. That thing broke the teacher like a twig. You can't fight it. Izuku pulled his leg free. His eyes weren't just glowing now, they were burning. I'm not going to fight it, Izuku said. I'm going to confuse it. He stepped out of the reeds. He didn't run. He took a deep breath and centered his chi. He tapped into the one for all stockpile, letting the yellow lightning flicker around his body, mixing with the green runic energy of the stone. He brought his hands together, fingers interlaced in a complex sigil, images of icon. Shigaraki was about to give the order to crush Aizawa's skull when he saw it. A glitch. One moment, there was nobody near the fountain. The next, there was a green-haired boy in a teal tracksuit standing 10 meters away. But then, the boy stuttered. Like a corrupted video file, the image of the boy split. 2 boys. 4. 8. What? Shigaraki scratched his neck. What is this? Are the graphics card drivers crashing? 10 Izuku Midoriyas stood in a circle around the Nomu and Shigaraki. They looked identical. They moved in perfect synchronization, shifting into a combat stance. Let him go, all 10 Izukus spoke at once. The voice was layered, echoing with a strange, harmonic resonance. The Nomu paused. Its simple brain couldn't process multiple targets. It looked left then right, confused. It's an illusion! Shigaraki yelled. Noma! Kill the real one! Just smash them all! The Nomu roared and lunged at the Izuku on the left. Whoosh! The monster's fist passed straight through the boy. The image didn't disappear. It just rippled like smoke and reformed. Wrong, the Izuku on the right said. The Nomu spun and backhanded the Izuku on the right. Connect. This time, the fist hit solid flesh. Gah! The Izuku flew backward, crashing into the stairs. Found you! Shigaraki grinned. Kill him! But as the Nomu charged the downed boy, the other 9 Izukus raised their hands. You think linear time applies to me? The downed Izuku shouted, standing up. He wasn't hurt. In fact, he flickered and vanished, reappearing back in the circle. These aren't illusions, Izuku, the central one, the current one, thought, sweat pouring down his face. These are time remnants. Echoes of myself from seconds ago and seconds in the future. I'm folding my own timeline onto itself. It was a dangerous spell. If he held it too long, he risked temporal dissociation, forgetting which version of himself was the Prime Izuku. If the Prime died, they all died. But if a remnant died, the Prime would just suffer the phantom pain of a death that never happened. Smash him! Shigaraki screamed, scratching his neck so hard it bled. Why can't you hit him? The Nomu was flailing now. It was swinging wildly at ghosts. Every time it hit one, another appeared. Izuku Prime saw his opening. He needed to get Aizawa out of the kill zone. While the Nomu was distracted fighting an Izuku from 3 seconds in the future, Prime Izuku sprinted forward. He channeled one for all into his legs. 5%. 10%. 15%. He grabbed Aizawa's unconscious body. Hold on, sensei. He didn't run away. He warped. Short-range teleportation portal. A fiery ring opened beneath them. Izuku and Aizawa dropped through the floor and reappeared at the base of the long staircase, near Tsuyu and Mineta. Izuku collapsed, the spell breaking. All the duplicate Izukus in the plaza vanished instantly, fading into green mist. Midoriya! Tsuyu cried, rushing to check on Aizawa. Izuku was panting. His nose was bleeding profusely. His skin felt like it was cracking, fine, porcelain lines appearing on his cheeks where the reality strain was too high. I got him, Izuku wheezed. You cheater! Shigaraki screamed from the plaza. He looked furious. You used cheat codes. You glitched the map. The villain turned slowly toward the students. The Nomu stood beside him, huffing, looking for a target. Nomu, Shigaraki pointed a shaking finger at Izuku. Delete that child. The Nomu screeched. The sound was ear-splitting. It launched itself across the plaza. It was fast. Faster than before. Izuku tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work. The images of Icon had drained his stamina completely. I can't move, Izuku realized. It's coming. He watched the monster close the distance. 50 meters. 20 meters. He reached for the eye. One last time freeze? Even if it kills me? No, the stone whispered. Look up. Boom. The entrance doors of the USJ exploded inward. Smoke billowed. A silhouette stood in the debris. He wasn't smiling. I am here. All Might had arrived. But he wasn't the grinning symbol of peace. He was furious. He had torn off his tie. His eyes were shadowed. All Might. Izuku breathed, his hand falling away from the amulet. Shigaraki stopped. A wide, twisted grin spread across his face beneath the hand mask. Finally, Shigaraki whispered. The continued screen. The battle that followed was a blur of violence that shook the foundations of the building. Izuku lay on the stairs, barely conscious, watching the titans clash. All Might versus Nomu. It was a slugfest. Shockwaves rattled Izuku's teeth. Every punch All Might threw was matched by the engineered monstrosity. He has shock absorption. Izuku yelled, though it came out as a whisper. All Might. Blunt force won't work. All Might seemed to hear him. Or maybe he just figured it out. Shock absorption, not nullification. All Might roared, grappling the beast. Then I just have to hit you until you can't absorb anymore. Plus Ultra. Izuku watched with his mystic sight active. He saw the energy inside All Might, the embers of One for All, flaring desperately. The wound on All Might's side was tearing open. His time limit was plummeting. He's dying, Izuku realized. He's pushing himself to death to save us. The Nomu dug its claws into All Might's weak spot. Blood sprayed. No! Izuku screamed. He forced his body to move. He crawled. He couldn't cast a big spell. He couldn't fight, but he could tip the scales. Izuku pointed a trembling finger at the floor beneath the Nomu's feet. Spell, the Slick of Sagitter. It was a minor hex. A cantrip. Usually used to make someone trip. Izuku cast it on the concrete right as the gnome planted its foot to deliver a fatal blow. The friction coefficient of the floor dropped to absolute zero. The gnome's foot slipped. It was a micro-fail. A tiny stumble. But in a battle of titans, a micro-fail was everything. The gnome's punch went wide, missing All Might's lung by an inch. All Might saw the opening. He didn't question why the beast stumbled. He capitalized. Go to hell. All Might delivered a punch that defied physics. It hit the Nomu in the gut, folding the monster in half. United States of Smash. The final blow launched the Nomu through the ceiling, through the dome, and into the stratosphere. The wind pressure cleared the smoke. The villains were blown back. All Might stood victorious. But he was steaming. He didn't move. He couldn't. You. Shigaraki scratched his neck, trembling with rage. You cheated again, that brat. Shigaraki looked at Izuku. He had seen the green spark on the floor. Kurogyri, Shigaraki hissed. Kill the green one. Forget All Might. The green one is the threat. Kurogyri expanded his mist, aiming for Izuku. Izuku couldn't dodge. He was done. But suddenly, an explosion rocked the plaza. Get away from him, you damn extras, Bakugo. The explosive teen launched himself at Kurogyri, pinning the Shadow Man's metal brace to the floor. I figured out your weakness. Bakugo shouted, grinning like a demon. On the other side, Todoroki froze half the plaza, trapping the remaining thugs. Kirishima leaped in to guard Izuku. We're here! Kirishima yelled. Midoriya! Todoroki looked at the boy on the stairs. You look terrible. I'm fine, Izuku mumbled. Shigaraki looked at the students. He looked at All Might, who was bluffing but clearly at his limit. He looked at the pro-heroes who were now arriving at the entrance. Snipe, Ectoplasm, Present Mike. Game over, Shigaraki sighed. Back to the save point, Kurogyri. Kurogyri warped free of Bakugo. The two villains retreated into the portal. Before he vanished, Shigaraki looked one last time at Izuku. Izuku Midoriya, Shigaraki whispered. You're not a hero. You're a bug in the system. Next time, I'll delete you first. The portal closed. The aftermath, the police arrived. The students were rounded up. Izuku was being loaded onto a stretcher. The cracks on his face were fading, but he felt incredibly cold. Detective Tsukachi was talking to All Might nearby. Midoriya, All Might called out, stepping away from the detective. He looked bad, skeletal form, coughing blood. All Might, Izuku whispered. Your time limit. It's reduced, All Might admitted grimly. That fight took months off my career. But you saved Aizawa. And you saved me. I just made the floor slippery, Izuku smiled weakly. You fought an army, All Might corrected. And you held off that beast with nothing but mirrors and smoke. Izuku looked up at the shattered glass of the USJ dome. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows. The glass. Izuku murmured. The skylight? Yes, the Nomu broke it, All Might said. No, Izuku said, his eyes unfocused. Not the skylight. The reality. He held up his hand. The air around his fingers seemed to shimmer, like heat haze. I used too much, Izuku whispered. I pulled 10 versions of myself into one moment. The universe, it remembers. What are you saying? I created a crack, Izuku said, closing his eyes as the exhaustion finally took him. And something is going to look through it. As the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, the eye of Agamotto gave one final, dull pulse. Unlike the warm, protective thrum it usually gave, this one felt like a shiver. Far away, in dimensions unseen by human eyes, something had noticed the green light. A hunger had been awakened. But for now, the students of Class 1A were safe. Deku! Bakugo stood by the ambulance doors as they closed. He didn't look angry. He looked unsettled. You didn't run, Bakugo muttered to the closed doors. You stupid nerd. You didn't run. The ambulance drove off, leaving the USJ behind. The first ripple had been cast. The storm was coming.